I call to order the Gladstone City Council special meeting and work session for March 23rd, 2021. It's 6:35 p.m. Per the Governor's Executive Order 20-16 regarding compliance with Oregon's public meeting laws, the City of Gladstone is abiding by social distancing requirements during the coronavirus pandemic. This meeting will be conducted in a hybrid manner. Staff and most of the council are in person in the council chambers. One council member and attendees will be engaged virtually using the Zoom platform. The Zoom access instructions can be found on the meeting agenda. Members of the City Council, staff, and the public all have access to this meeting. Normally, I do not allow public comment during our work sessions, but in this instance, I will allow comment during the special meeting portion only. The work session is a time for the council and staff to discuss matters openly and informally, and public comment is not a part of our agenda and is not allowed. The city upgraded its Zoom software so it allows us to easily conduct events with a simpler interface in a professional setting. There are two groups of participants, panelists and attendees. Panelists are those you will see on the platform, such as elected officials, the city administrator, city attorney, and any staff or person making a presentation. Attendees are those in the audience. Attendees will still be able to speak for 3 minutes during the public part of our meeting. We will not have a consent agenda, business from the audience, nor business from the council. The only items to be discussed are those on this agenda. Additionally, if members of the public become disruptive, we will mute and remove them from the video conference. If that fails to stop the disruption, we will recess the meeting and return within 5 minutes. If we are unable to continue, council will briefly meet off air to move unfinished business to the next council agenda. Tonight, our special meeting is to get an update and discuss the recent ice storm event. And then we will adjourn into a work session where we will get an update on sustaining current service levels of the Gladstone Fire Department. Haley, could you please call the roll?
Counselor Ripley?
Yes.
Counselor Alexander?
Yes.
Counselor Tracy?
Here.
Counselor Hartman?
Here.
Counselor Todd?
Here.
Counselor Garlington?
Here.
Mayor Stemple?
Here. Could everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Because this is a special meeting instead of a regular council meeting, I will have staff recognize those individuals that wish to speak by raising their hand. And they will do so after our debrief has been concluded. And for those that are participating, thank you very much for being here this evening. Item 1 is the ice storm debrief.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. The purpose of this special meeting is to provide a debrief to the City Council and the public on the February 12th ice storm. So tonight we have Eric Underwood from PGE, Fire Chief Rick Huffman, our Acting Public Works Director, Darren Canaparoli, and Police Chief John Schmerber. Local governments have a responsibility to ensure the safety of its community in emergency situations. I wanted to reassure everyone that the city does have an emergency operations plan, and it depends on what type of disaster we are dealing with on how we respond to that. On February 9th, staff had notified the City Council and public through social media about the anticipated weather from the Clackamas County Emergency Management's Office. It is our responsibility to keep water, sewer infrastructure operating, our streets clear of debris, and emergency services able to respond 24/7 throughout an event. PGE Representative Eric Underwood reached out and established communication protocols throughout the weekend. Fire Chief Huffman, Police Chief Schmerber, and Acting Public Works Director Canaparoli and I were all active participants with the city's Emergency Operations Center throughout the event, with Fire Chief Huffman as the city's emergency manager. As the city administrator, I kept the elected officials informed of all the decisions being made by management throughout the event. So tonight, we're going to start our presentation by asking PGE Representative Eric Underwood to provide a brief report.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, and thank you for having me come give an update for you. First of all, I just wanted to say that we really value our partnership with Gladstone, and we thank you for your ongoing support and communication throughout this really unprecedented event. Everyone is restored now, but there's still a lot of work to be done through the coming months. So what I'd like to do is just start off with some overall storm statistics, go into a little bit about the impacts of Gladstone, and talk about how we plan to move forward. So the storm, during the storm, we repaired 44 transmission lines. That is unprecedented. We had repairs going on, or we completed repairs of 20 substations throughout our territory. And there were approximately 400 miles of transmission lines restored. We had 12,733 wires down during the event. The crews that we had out in the field at the peak time were over 400 crews. And then the employees that were working in those crews to restore power at its peak were 3,000. In Gladstone, the outages occurred between February 11th through February 19th. Total outages, now that means from the source, in Gladstone, there were 256 outages within the city. And then the total customers that were impacted by those outages were 9,378 total customers. Now this also includes 2-3 events for one customer. So it's not just the one event. And that's why you see the 9,000. And that was mostly due to down wires and broken poles throughout the city. The average outage duration per customer for hours was 73 hours per customer. That's average. And the hardest hit areas in the city was in the northern portion around Webster Road, just south of Strawberry Lane, the Los Verdes townhomes, Gladstone Forest Apartments, Rivergate City Park area, all the way down to around Portland Avenue at Glen Echo Avenue, or the Gladstone Civic Center area. Any questions at this point?
Are you all done?
No.
Come on, I'm going to talk about how we're going to move forward. I didn't know if you had any specific questions about the city. Yeah.
I have one question for you on, do you have any problems with people backfeeding anything with their generators running?
Not that I'm aware of, no. I haven't heard of any issues with that.
That was my only question, because everywhere you went, there was a generator running somewhere. If people didn't have their mains turned off, they could make a mess.
Yeah, I didn't get any sense of whether generators were an issue. I would imagine I would have heard if they were, so. Okay, so that being the storm impacts, to talk a little bit about how we're moving forward. So through March and April, we'll be patrolling and performing remaining repairs and removing abandoned poles, transformers, and utility hardware from the field. Our objective is to complete communication equipment transfers to new and repaired poles within 60 days. And we intend to remove 90% of old poles or broken poles that remain standing next to new ones by the end of July. Our crews will be also coordinating with contract resources to perform an unbelievable number of repairs and post-storm work over the next several months. So those are our objectives through July. And now I'm done, so.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes, Councillor Garlington.
What protocol will you follow?
Sorry, I can't.
It may be off. There you go.
What protocol will you follow to notify all
homes that you're turning off power on a particular day and or impacting their basic life that day, or maybe a couple of days when you do this kind of work? I mean, how are we getting a hold of everybody so that they're not surprised? Specifically restaurants and businesses also, and that sort of thing.
Right. Typically, we'll send letters or we'll call those customers that will be impacted if we're having a planned outage for repairs.
So I just wanted to apologize in advance if you hear that I said horrible things about PGE, because it was just the heat of the moment and I was out for 6.5 days. So I didn't mean it. I'm thankful we don't live in Texas. So thank you. We love PGE.
Thank you. Appreciate your support. I was out for 6 days as well. It was not fun.
No. Anessa, Counselor Hartman.
Yes, thank you. Is there a connection or any specific reasons as to why the areas that you said were the worst? Like, were there reasons why you think that those areas were the worst?
Just certain feeders were mostly impacted, I think, just because of the ice. I really have no other explanation other than that. The feeders had just gave way, or the transformers blew. It could have been older equipment. It's hard to tell.
Thank you.
Counselor Alexander.
I guess I just want to clarify or hear it out loud. This is not going to be any cost to any of the residents or the city.
Is your mic on? There you go. Go ahead.
No cost to the city or the residents whatsoever.
For the
Your repairs.
No, there shouldn't be additional cost for the repairs. No, not at all.
Okay.
In fact, we're trying to help our customers and the communities we serve. We have recently, the PGE Foundation has recently committed $75,000 to selected charitable organizations. Those primarily that are providing household goods, food, clothing, emergency service, emergency preparedness, that sort of thing.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Anything else?
I thought of one more.
Yes.
Sorry. And it's a question that I was receiving a lot from people as to, I'm just going to ask it. I'm not, why no discounts were applied to the days that those who had no power for an extended period of time. And
Well,
I'm
that's-
asking this just because I've been asked it and I don't know the answer to it. So I don't know if you can elaborate on why that might not be an option.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that as well. I'll have to take that back, but I can get you the answer. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
certainly.
Well, aren't the electric bills based on usage? So if you weren't using the power for those days, you wouldn't be charged?
Typically, yes, that's the way it works. But that's beyond my my expertise. So I'll have to take that back, and I can get that response back to you soon.
I know that I still was charged for days that I had,
Really?
yeah, just like what you were saying, Mayor. I thought the same thing, but I still had, it was like a small amount. It was kind of like a flat fee almost.
Oh, the base. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, I'll take that back, and I'll do some digging and see if I can get you an answer here soon. Sorry, I don't know it right off the top of my head.
Well, thank you very much for being on tonight and answering some of our questions. So are you going to stay on until we're done with the debrief in case something else comes up?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. Who's next?
Fire Chief Rick Huffman.
Rick, you just turned your mic off.
Okay, back
There we
on.
go.
Thank you. As the city's emergency manager, I have to say that it was an unusual last year and maybe 2 years because of all the events we've had previous to the ice storm. That actually helped the emergency management team and executive team work well together. I have to throw that out there because we were in constant contact over the weekend, I would say almost hourly, especially during the first few days. And our previous incidents really helped us kind of think ahead and know what each other needed beforehand. So I feel lucky to be part of the executive team here. The ice storm actually validated a bunch of needs that we've identified in the pandemic and the fires and the water break we had when I first started. And I think the chief, police chief will elaborate on those when we finish up tonight, but definitely using volunteers and getting more emergency preparedness training is our key items for the community. I also want to say that Eric Underwood was very accessible during the incident, and every time one of us called him, he answered our questions right away. And that kind of also relates to our reliance on our phone system, which we do get a priority signal for responders. And our cell phones never wavered, and we had full data and communications the whole time. So I think that said a lot. I don't think we ever had a hiccup. On my personal phone, we dropped calls because of the towers. So I have to say that worked really well. And that's about it as emergency manager. If you have any questions regarding that portion of my job, if not, I'll just kind of give you a summary of the fire department's actions. When we got notice of the storm, that Friday night, I began upstaffing the fire department with as many people as possible. And we tried to keep another engine or a squad, or at least a minimum of a fourth person on the fire engine staffed. We had generator power at the fire station through the whole event. Public Works was really good about keeping it fueled up. We had no issues with power in the fire station. Fuel was fine. An advantage to having a smaller city is the miles that we drive are not that long. So our fuel consumption in the fire engine was not bad. For the staff vehicles, we were all over the place and we had to go out of the area to get fuel, but we were able to get it. Communications again remained intact. I spoke to the cell phone issue, but we also had warnings that our 800 dispatch radio system might go down. There was issues, but we never went into a software fail mode, which would have messed up our communications. So everything, I think we lucked out as far as communications go. As far as the city, we were really in connected the whole time. Water system remained functional. We worked really close with Public Works Director, with Darren and Jim Wina at the time. We also coordinated with Public Works in case we have incidents. One thing about our job is when we go out on the scene, we slip and slide quite a bit, especially if we're at a fire. So Public Works is vital not on two things: to maintain water supply if we're in a low pressure area, and to spread sand to prevent slipping and for rescue and firefighting actions. Luckily, we didn't have to do that much, but they were right on top of it with us. We ran over 100 additional emergencies that week of the ice storm. It's over double our normal call load. And related to that, because the rigs had chains on them and with all the downed trees, our response times were significantly higher. As far as responses specific to the storm, we had carbon monoxide issues at multiple locations. The notable one that resulted in 6 people transported and fatalities. So that was a very unfortunate incident. We had quite a few of those, to be honest. So I think probably the next biggest one was ice falling and trees falling and helping with that, just the public service calls. To the Councilor Ripley's point, we did have concerns about backfeed with generators and solar panels, but we did not have any issues, but we were warning the crews about that. And mutual aid with our partners, Tualatin Valley and Clackamas, was significant. We ran multiple chimney fires at the same time. So as the heat went out, people would build up bigger fires in their fireplaces to heat their home, and some of them hadn't been used in a while. So a chimney fire basically extends all the way up the stack, and unfortunately it can breach through the side and go into the attic and catch the house on fire. So we had a number of those during that week. But that kind of summarizes the fire department actions. Any questions?
Great.
I don't see any. All right.
All right, Public Works, Darren.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to kind of go over an overview of Public Works through the whole event, and just kind of summarize some of the issues that we in Public Works dealt with during the event. So we started prepping for the storm a couple days before the actual event, knowing that it was coming. Fueling up vehicles, putting chains on vehicles, making sure all the equipment and everything that we would use during the storm was ready to go for that. When the storm actually started to hit, we moved to a 12-hour a day, 24-hour coverage during the event, with the main objective of snow and ice removal. Obviously, that kind of changed a little bit with the way that the storm progressed. We knew ice was coming. We didn't expect it was going to be as bad as it was. And not only that, I don't think that anybody had any issues with or realized that there was going to be that big of an issue. Come Friday, obviously, we had the ice that started that evening, well, kind of late evening or early evening, excuse me, which then knocked out power. Pretty much all the city facilities are on generator power. We made it a priority to make sure that the generators were full of fuel, ready to go, and constantly checking them throughout the event. At one point, we did actually shuttle fuel to fill generators to make sure that we would last, not knowing exactly how long power would be out. With the power being out, that obviously causes an issue with water. I mean, we've got a pump. We use the intertie with Oak Lodge pretty much from about Saturday on to be able to supply the city with drinking water and other water needs as well. That worked out very well. During this event, it wasn't only us that was affected by it, obviously. The North Clackamas County Water Coalition ended up having a power issue with generators, and which in effect affects us. The good news is that Oak Lodge has more than enough supply to supply us, and so that intertie worked out very well. Another kind of caveat to a storm that you expect to be just a typical snow and ice storm was the power outage. That was huge for the city. Not only did the North Clackamas Coalition lose power, but so did Oak Lodge on the sewer pump station that runs kind of the area by the Civic Building Public Works type of, or Public Works area, which ended up causing an SSO in that area. And then once everything started melting, that ended up causing an SSO into the Clackamas from our normal hotspot that we have there.
And an SSO is a sewer
Sanitary
overflow.
sewer overflow.
Sanitary
Correct.
sewer overflow.
So that was kind of the big things for Public Works during the storm. The backside of that was the debris cleanup. That was a huge on-taking, I guess is probably the best way to put that. The goal was to the initial goal was to clean up the streets and parks to make them obviously passable and everything else that would go along with that. The goal was to clean up the right-of-way. That is from back of curb to back of curb in the areas that have curbs, and then back of sidewalk for the areas that have sidewalk. Some of the issues we faced with that was the homeowners saw us out there doing the work, and they would start moving stuff out to the curb line, which was great when we were there. We didn't have a problem cleaning up that debris. It was after we'd already gone past their residence, or, you know, we're down the block a little bit. There was a lot of residents that were putting things out for us to clean out or clean up. We ended up kind of backtracking a little bit, which made the debris cleanup a little longer than I would have liked. But I think in the end, it ended up being very successful. And then with that, after we were done with the street debris cleanup, we still had all our parks to get through. There was a lot of debris in the parks, as there was everywhere in the city. Getting through the parks wasn't as bad, but when you're in the streets, you can use equipment. When you're in the parks, you don't really have the option to use equipment, and you tend to cause more damage using equipment in the park. So it takes a little longer to do the parks because there's a lot of handwork and a lot of packing of things to be able to get rid of the debris. We opened the debris site down at Meldrum on Monday the 16th. We staffed that all the way through the 28th. That was staffed 7 days a week, all the way through the event, including weekends. We were making sure that that was solely for Gladstone residents. We were checking IDs, water bills, anything that somebody could prove that they were a resident of Gladstone. And it seemed to be very, well, it was very successful. But at times it can be an issue when you're questioning residents, you know, as to where they live and things like that. But all in all, it ended up working out pretty well. We on the 8th of this month, we hired a contractor to come in and start chipping up the debris. We estimated there was about 10,000 yards of debris in the pile when we closed it on the 28th. We started going through that, got the debris chipped up. It was done in a time less than what was originally estimated. And then after that, we had this big pile of debris chips. We worked with our garbage hauler, B&B leasing, to remove the chips. We loaded the chips, they hauled off the chips. We estimate there was approximately 4,000 yards of chips that were removed from the site, all based on the storm debris. Another thing I kind of wanted to bring up was labor hours that were used during this event. Public Works used approximately 955 man hours during this storm. And out of that 955, 267 of those hours were overtime hours. And that's all I have. Question?
Thank you, Darren.
Do we have any questions? Counselor Garlington.
You mentioned the parks. At what point will you be done checking all the trees in all the parks? And do you have a plan to make sure that those are all safe for all of our residents?
We do. We are currently working with a contractor to get hanging branches, widow makers, as you call them, out of the trees. As you can imagine, with the influx of everything, it is their backlog. And we're trying to get them on site as soon as possible. I'm anticipating sometime within the next 2 weeks to have them. We have evaluated all the parks and looked at the issues. And we will go through those, you know, as a priority of issues of life safety type of thing. So.
Counselor Alexander.
I guess I'm just stuck on this, but everybody asked me, what was the cost of the chipping and the cost of the removal? People want to know what we paid to have that done.
Right. So the chipping cost, we haven't got the final bill on that yet. We estimate that to be somewhere between $40,000 and $47,000 for the chipping cost. The debris removal, using our franchise agreement with B&B Leasing, for the most part was very economical. with our relationship with them, it was very cheap to get rid of that material. With that being said, the declaration of through the state and through the feds and dealing with FEMA, they will be reimbursed for a portion of that, not all of it, but a portion of
Thank you.
that.
Counselor Todd.
Hey there. So you said that there was about 10,000 yards of debris that was down there, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And 4,000 of it got taken away. So are we using any of that for our parks, our pathways, muddy trails, homeowners to come and get as they're preparing their gardens, anything like that?
Yeah, so that debris was, it ended up being about 4,000 yards of debris after everything was chipped up. Out of that debris, we used that debris so I mean, when you chip up the debris, it ends up being about 50 to 40% less than what the actual bulk debris is. With that, we did give some chips to the nature park. They're up there now. We dropped off, I believe, 3 loads up there. We made sure our chip bin down at Meldrum Bar Park was full, and the rest of the debris was hauled off.
Any more questions? I don't see any. Thank you very much, Darren. Next.
Okay, Police Chief Schmerber. You're muted.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Just a brief update on the police department throughout the ice storm. Like others, our vehicles were prepared. In advance, we made sure we had fuel in our cars and made sure that we had access to some sort of fuel, just like everybody else in the city. But an overview, the police department really is in support of public works and in these events and fire, notwithstanding emergency calls that we need to respond to. But during that event, we actually responded to approximately about 40 welfare checks from people calling in looking for relatives and so on. They haven't heard from them, just to check on to make sure they're safe. And that doesn't account for some of the vulnerable population that our officers already know, that you just arbitrarily check on and make sure that they're okay and see if they have any needs. Again, we assisted Public Works where it was needed, whether it's with helping put up signs or putting signs back up or moving them back into streets, et cetera. Another one was several alarm calls. When the power goes out, we get a lot of alarm calls from businesses on McLaughlin to home alarms. So we respond to those alarms to make sure everything's okay. And obviously when we know when the power is out, we do a lot of neighborhood patrols and we stay in the neighborhood quite a bit. The police department didn't have to really push too much overtime out. We ran our shifts as normal. They were out there constantly, so that wasn't a big issue for us. But I did want to check, and I recently checked to make sure that I was accurate. But between the patrols and the neighbors watching out for one another, Gladstone had 0 burglaries during that time period without power. Fortunately, throughout county, although 16 is too many, countywide, there were 16 that we ran a check on that reported through CCOM. So not all agencies go through CCOM, but from the CCOM component, that's what we found. Really, based on that, anywhere we can assist is what we did. And so everything else was mentioned above. We were in constant contact over the weekend and a couple of days ahead and after. So do you have any questions for the police side? I feel like we're kind of the lower spectrum of this event in support. So I thought Public Works and Fires did a fantastic job. So that putting those people, the crews out there, 24/7 for 3-4 days was exceptional and absolutely needed. So I thought that was a great call.
Any questions? I don't see any. I wanted to just say two things, and this is not related to any of our departments. This is Water and Environmental Services, our sewer purveyor. I had a meeting with them last week, and I just wanted to mention that the media had reported that there was effluent going into the river. They stated that as a precaution, but it actually did not happen. So yay for that one. And that it was also reported that they did not have backup power, and that's why they were having issues, and that is incorrect as well. They have 3 levels of redundancies in there, and the first 2, the north and south connections to the main transformers did fail, but they have these huge generators on site, and it was able to power them up for the whole event. So they managed really, really well.
So really, where do we go from here? We met as a management team to debrief after the ice storm, and we'd like to think about how can we do better? And communication is one of those areas where we can always improve on how we're telling people what's going on in our community. And so I just want to take a couple minutes to allow our fire chief and police chief to present to you their idea of how we can do better next time in the event of this. All right.
Bert, do you want me to start out? Was that yes? Sorry. Rick, do you want me to start?
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead, John.
Thank you. As the fire chief mentioned, Huffman mentioned, we spent almost an entire 2 years in some sort of crisis. And we've been able to learn a lot. With that, we've also have been trying to figure out what to do with our volunteer groups and how we get communication going, et cetera. What we've put up there is a flow chart of how we feel in the event of an emergency, just depending on the situation. But if it's full blown out like this ice storm or maybe wildfires or something else, kind of what the flow chart would look like with your incident command, meaning unified, bringing in the city administrator, fire chief, police chief, and public works director. A policy group is really the elected officials and liaising with the city administrator. And in the event we needed to bring everybody together, the location would be the community room. The community room would be used for 2 things. One, to get everybody together if Jackie needed to brief up or the city administrator needed to brief up the elected officials, but it can also be used for formal public information, meaning a press conference or something like that. For that. But then you drop down to the EOC. The EOC is located, and those who have done a tour of the police department knows it's in our training room. And the generators fired that area up just fine over this ice event. And so that's where your EOC would be located, and that's for resources, PIO operations. That's where the main operations would occur out of, and any logistics and finance. So I know those are names up there that you may or may not know. But it's all needed. All those resources are needed if we have an event. So as we go from there, then everything else, police, fire, and public works falls underneath. But the real important part here that we want to point out is we recognize that communication, not everybody has social media. Or if your power's out, you may not have anything, right? So we need a way to communicate with people better. We need to be able to use our resources a little bit more efficient and get an understanding of what GEMS really can do or CERT really can do for us. And we feel that having a resource center and opening up a resource center in Gladstone for the purpose of communication, and as you see on their charging station, hydration, food and warming, et cetera, because that facility is capable of doing those things. Would be great, but utilizing GEMS and CERT as options for us. Maybe GEMS staffs that with the senior center, and it's located. And I'm sorry, the resource center has been identified as the senior center. If I didn't say that already, but having the senior director of the senior center manager, help coordinate that with everything running through incident command and the EOC. So that means an event like the one we just had, PGE would be a partnering agency that we can funnel communication, real-time communication, and work with them and have maybe them on site, or people can come to the senior center to get that information if they don't have access to email or social media or what have you. And it can be staffed by real people, like our volunteers through GEMS. CERT can go out maybe and help and work with our seniors, or go out and check on people if they need to, or provide some sort of service. All those are details that have not been worked out. We're still working those out, but I think we have a very, very solid plan for that. And everything listed on there and more could be provided through that. And that it works all in conjunction with the incident command. So that means it's structured, it's disciplined, and we have real-time information getting to and from. So, Rick, do you have anything else you want to add into that?
No, the police chief and I have been meeting with the GEMS. GEMS stands for Gladstone Emergency Management Support, and CERT, if you're not familiar, is Community Emergency Response Teams, which has kind of grown into a nationally supported entity, which helps during disasters. Those two volunteer groups, with the lead group as GEMS, we're planning on having this central resource point. We found over the last year that whether it's the pandemic, fires, smoke, evacuation potential, or the ice storm, really people just need information.
Mhm.
And if their cell phones die, they can come and have a cup of coffee, charge up their phone, look at the bulletin boards, look at postings from families or what we can post. So I think what the police chief has shown you here is something that we've kind of proven we need. We validated why we need this. Now we just need to move forward. And the connection to all these boxes is communication. And we're working on that too, to make sure we always maintain multiple layers of communications between these lines that on the boxes on the screen. So I think John and I both agree that this is, we've recommended this to the city administrator, and we think this is what we need, and the community actually can get on board too with the volunteerism, that we'll need help. We'll need people to help, whether it's guide traffic, give out food and drinks and support. We'll need the community support, and we'll be able to centralize it. And we just feel this is the best plan that we can come up with right now.
And
So
what,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
one of the examples we give is, yeah, it's great to have this, but we need some preparation. And so we're starting those conversations with GEMS and working and laying out accountability and responsibility tasks for them on what we want to see, what's going to best help our community. Now there's always going to be other options and ideas that we'll share and we'll kick around. But as the fire chief said, this would work. And we can obviously make some tweaks as we go if need be.
So my question is, you have GEMS and you have CERT, and I've been involved with both, and they've just kind of been a gathering of people that really don't have a mission and then kind of stopped. GEMS is continuing, but CERT has really kind of fallen away. Do you really think that having two separate groups would be a good idea, or maybe just having one group would be easier to corral?
So John and I have talked about that, and we both believe that GEMS being the lead group they're the clearinghouse and the organizer. It's really about what do you need for that event. And that would be the group that can oversee that. And within that, it could be CERT, it could be Medical Reserve Corps, it could be the food bank, it could be Red Cross, the chaplain group.
Okay.
And so really, and that's what we found, that there are all these agencies and groups that have capabilities, but we're just a little disorganized on how to coordinate them for the need at the moment. And this would get us ahead of that.
Okay, so CERT, would GEMS then be the group that would train or coordinate training for the CERT, or would that still be a separate entity?
Those kind of details we haven't really worked through, but
Okay.
I believe those are easily answered. It's just a matter of funneling the responsibilities and whatever is attached to that. CERT usually has funding and other issues that are possible, and they all have their own lane that they are good at.
Mhm.
So we'll have to just kind of examine and work that out.
Okay, well, this is my mission for the rest of my term is this
Mhm.
topic. It's huge, and I don't think we have the ability to wait and do this and kick this can down the road. It's something that we really have to start working on now. So whatever you need from me, I'm sure other people have questions, but I'm in with both feet and arms and body. I'm there for you guys. So any questions?
I think that's the area where the elected officials can really help us out the most, is getting our citizens to understand that they need to take personal responsibility for their preparedness. That's why we launched the Are You Ready campaign in the newsletter. But those are the types of activities that we would like you to help our citizens with. And I think that we can give you the tools to do that and gyms. And that's how this starts. Getting people together at the senior center to put kits together, to show them what to put in emergency kits. Those are all things that we can do now and not have to wait for an event to happen.
And every month in our newsletter, put something in there to guide people on what they can do to be prepared. I mean, we have to get ahead of this.
Absolutely.
Mayor, Mayor,
Yes.
the bonus about this is the fire chief and I pretty much have given GEMS a mission and direction. And it's about education and preparedness, and it's about the volunteer and resource center. So we're off to a good start with them, and they seem to be very excited about it.
Good. Well, we have some really good examples, real world examples in just the past 12 months of why this is needed. So I don't think that people are going to balk. I think people are going to be on board. I'm hoping that they're going to be on board. All right. Thank you. Is that it on this one?
That concludes our presentation. I don't know if there's anybody from the public that has any comments.
Do we have anybody, Haley? Nope. No public.
I do have one question.
Yes.
These dangerous limbs on private property, there's one across the street from me, which eventually I'll go over there and fix it, but what are we gonna do about all the rest of the streets with the dangerous limbs? Public Works taking care of the parks. People don't have to go to the parks, but they have to walk out their door, walk down the street. And if there's stuff hanging over the sidewalks, is there a way, that's gonna be the homeowner's responsibility, but how do we make that homeowner get an arborist in or whatever they need to do to remove that hazard?
We haven't had any issues with people not being responsive. And I think it's as Public Works is being out in the community and recognizing these, they're getting a lot of people trying to understand, do I need a permit? Do I need to get a contractor? So I think the private developers or the private sector has been willingly, so we haven't experienced those that don't. But you're right, it is the homeowner's responsibility to get those fixed. So
At some point, will there be an enforcement on that?
we can work with our code enforcement, but obviously we're trying to be very lenient given the circumstances to not enforce that. But it would be knock and talks where you go out and encourage them from an enforcement standpoint to get that taken care of.
I just want to say on that, the cert, when I took it, there was a few people in the class. Then we had the meetings and the next class was twice as big and you were putting things in the newsletter. I remember that and people were collecting them and putting, but we just didn't have an incident. So now if there's an incident, I think if you had meetings again, more people would be involved and come and want to be ready for that as to where there was really, last time it seemed like we were all geared up for this 9.0 earthquake and that's all they sort of focused on. But now you can see there's a lot more to be ready.
Well, I will say that I am very proud of the management team that we have in place for emergencies. And I don't think we're at the point where we're like, bring it on, but we enjoy, we have maneuvering through
Yeah,
these
please.
events that we've had. So
I do have a question. How
Yes.
many people do we have currently in GEMS?
I only know of 3 that email me, other than the police chief and the fire chief but Tom.
We've had about 4 active members that we deal with in meetings, but I don't know the total membership and I don't know who's underneath the
But anybody
leadership.
can join GEMS, correct? They
Yes.
just have to go through a training
my
type thing
understanding.
or
Yeah.
something.
I'm sure they would welcome that.
yeah, they've never been given guidance
Yeah.
And
I
I,
think
and
that would be
yeah, and
huge.
I think that we're just ripe. Gladstone was recognized countywide for our preparation and
Mhm.
how we responded to the wildfires and now this. And I think now it's time for our volunteers to become part of that.
And there's people who want to volunteer. I mean, there was so much help going out during that
Yeah,
entire thing. People just
incredible.
doing great things. And imagine if you harness that and actually
Harness it now before
Yeah.
they've forgotten.
Yeah, precisely. I think people sort of went through and they downloaded in their own minds. I saw it on social media. What did you learn from this? What will you have now in your box of stuff that you didn't have before? I saw lots of people not having scented candles in every room because all of a sudden after 6 days of 5 different flavors, people, there's just
Oh,
weird
yeah.
things that you sort of go, I wish I would have had that. I wish I would have, and you can't go buy it the day before. It's like
Generators, yeah.
right, going to
Yeah.
Les Schwab before, to get snow tires, right before you're supposed to have a snowstorm. It's not there. So you have to get it now and remember it. But once you're out of it, people go,
Yeah, I was feeding a whole bunch of people through it, and I was so proud of the fact that I just hoarded tuna fish, and it comes to the point, and I did not have a handheld can opener. The only thing I had was an electric one.
so it's on your list now, right?
It's on my list. I have a very expensive handheld because that's all they had left.
Right, exactly.
Well, I would just like to add to that, back on my volunteer bandwagon. When you need 5 people to volunteer for something, it's better to have 10 people on that list because 5 of those people might have their own crisis at home and cannot leave their house to help others, which is fine because we can all only do what we can do. But this is why it's so important for every person who is able to volunteer and be in the know. That doesn't mean you have to show up every time, but it helps to be in the know of what's going on and how to do it and how to, what do you need at the store? I spoke with Anessa on the phone and I said, how many people before this storm went out and got $200 worth of groceries and like me threw $150 worth of them away because our refrigerator didn't work for 5 days. So, although you want that kind of thing, it's helpful to know, what is essential, what do you need? And quite frankly, I'm not sure that we have all that at our house either. We had 1 book of matches, 1 in 5 days. Do you know how many matches you can go through?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, I think we're all going to look at emergencies and.
Just a little bit different. You won't pass them up when they're handing them out somewhere.
Eric
Um,
has his hand raised.
Oh, Eric too.
Oh. Eric.
You're muted, Eric.
I'll defer to Councilor Hartman. She had her hand up.
Okay, Counselor Hartman.
Thank you, Eric. I just had a couple of comments in terms of us being mindful about, obviously the number one opinion I hear from our residents, is the communications, or they felt like there was a lack of communications. Like what can we do? Is there a system that we can look into similar to like what the school district has? The reason why we were able to reach so many people for those meals is they have that like text, systems. And so that was a way that people were getting information through text message, through automated voicemails. And I don't know if that's something that we can look into or chat about for when the internet goes down again, or if that ever happens, then we're able to update our residents that way. Might be something we look into similar to what they use. I don't know if we've been talking about that or if you thought about that. I guess Administrator Betts or Schmerber.
The system that cities, local governments use is called the Community Emergency Notification System. It's called SENS. And typically, like if there was an evacuation notice or something that we needed to, but it comes at a cost, several thousands of dollars to be able to automate those messages out. If that becomes a priority of where you want us to spend our resources, then we need to budget for that kind of notification.
I don't
Yeah,
think we
no,
really
that
had
makes sense.
tell anybody. I mean, we didn't have a place for them to go. We didn't have a central location.
It's more for the updates. I think what I hear a lot from people is that they didn't know what was going on. They just didn't know what was going on. And so providing those updates, even if there's no updates, gives people the sense of comfort, and especially in emergency situations like that. So even if it's like, don't know, like, here's what we did today, I think would improve for, like, that would make a lot of people feel more comfortable. And then once we do get a resource center, you know, having that ability to communicate that way out to everybody who doesn't have internet.
Did the school district send out flash alerts? Is that how a lot of people were getting the mutual aid information? That
Yep.
was like through Leslie Robinette and all of that? Okay.
Yes, yeah. So they were sending out text messages once a day, about what the updates were. You know, and then they would have links that, you know, you could go see this if you needed this. And that's how they were able to communicate with so many people.
We do use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all of our social media accounts too. That's how we were trying to push information out as well.
Yeah, just a suggestion.
All right, Eric?
Thank you. So I just wanted to partially readdress Councilor Hartman's question earlier about why some areas are impacted more than others within the city. And we had a discussion a lot about this tonight, those trees. A lot of areas have more trees closer to power lines than other areas do. And I know I'll continue to research the question to get more detail, but that's one of the big ones, the trees. And that's something that we're definitely looking at moving forward is vegetation management. And we want to work with our cities on tree policies and that sort of thing next to power lines. And that leads me to another thing I wanted to mention is that our CEO and Director of Resiliency, we're going around doing presentations on, we're giving storm updates, and we're talking about what we're doing as a company to move forward to get better, to prepare more for these types of events because they're happening more and more and they're getting worse each time. And so we're happy to come to Gladstone to give that presentation, to have that discussion, and to answer any other questions that the council may have in more detail.
All
That's
right.
it.
Any more questions, comments? I don't see any. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here and for doing such an amazing job during another crisis, hopefully the last one for a while. So that is going to end our special meeting portion. So I need a motion to adjourn to the work session.
I make a motion that we move to the work session.
I second it.
Motion was made by Counselor Garlington and seconded by Counselor Alexander to adjourn into the work session. Do we have any discussion? Nope. Since we have one person on Zoom, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Of course. Counselor Ripley,
Yes.
Counselor Alexander,
Yes.
Counselor Tracy. Yes. Counselor Hartman,
Here.
Counselor Todd.
Yes.
Counselor Garlington,
Yes.
Mayor Stimple.
Yes, so we adjourn into the work session at 7:32 p.m. And as I stated before, this work session does not include comments from the audience. It's an opportunity for council and staff to informally discuss a specific item that may require further future action, but that action is not at tonight's meeting. When and if it is brought forward during a regular council meeting, that will be the time for public comment. That's it.
Great. Well, thank you again, Mayor and Council. I'm excited for you to listen to what Chief Huffman has to say. This is going to be an educational presentation for you to understand how we provide fire department services and how we have evolved in the past 5 years. I believe Chief Huffman would like to do your presentation first and then hold questions for afterwards.
Okay. Thank you.
While Haley's bringing that up, Mayor, City Council members, Administrator Betts, I'm really excited to talk to you tonight about your fire services. Overall, this workshop is to give you a baseline information so you can read the other documents that are in the city that have been related to the fire department service levels in the past and currently and considering the future. As the administrator said, if possible, can you hold your questions to the end? I'll try to get through the presentation as quickly as possible, but it should be able to put in context some of your questions and maybe related to the documents that we'll talk about. So overall, though, tonight I'd like to talk about a few things, and I'd like to have a few goals to achieve. One would be to provide you an understanding of your current emergency services in the metro area. And I call it the metro area because it has a strong influence on the service level. It would be a completely different discussion if we were in a very rural area. So being in the metro area does have impacts. I'd also like to provide you with the top 3 considerations for the upcoming biennium to consider and provide you more baseline information to help address the goals of sustaining the fire department staffing levels in the next biennium and beyond. I have to start with an acknowledgement. You know, Gladstone is a unique city in my opinion because I have never personally experienced the involvement and the rich history of support and commitment that this community has. It is very deeply rooted, and we have to acknowledge that. The firefighters of Gladstone have provided exceptional staffing and response that has allowed emergency services to thrive for many years. And that's very important because that helped us get where we are today. And that's a discussion that we have to have. And that is really the base of why we are here today, because we had an exceptional system prior. It has challenges now, as you'll see. Even though the conditions have changed, the past accomplishments must be acknowledged, and we must continue to foster volunteerism in the community preparedness. That's an easy statement after our previous discussion. So I just had to say that because there's so many unique qualities to the city that I think this is a very good opportunity for everybody. So why did I end up here, and why did we end up in this room tonight? Well, about 10 years ago, an organizational evaluation was conducted in 2010. In that document, there were recommendations there was really a lot of introspective evaluation. One of it was they recognized what I just said. There was a very robust membership of the fire department, and they had a lot of commitment to going on emergencies. But they also recognized that because of their urban area and the growth of the city, that the department had to migrate into more of a city organization with its management practices. And part of that is hiring a full-time fire chief. And so those recommendations, and with some other council support, morphed into a few years later of hiring the first full-time fire chief in the city. After the hiring of that fire chief, they recognized to get some more studies done. So in 2017, they did an analysis of fire department services, and really it was a recognition of key people within the fire department, the city, and city stakeholders that came together to decide what is important for you for emergencies. And that was all documented in the 2017 study. From that, and this is kind of like a study overload, but from that analysis came 2 key documents for the future. One is called the Standards of Cover, and it's the long name is Community Risk Assessment Standards of Cover. And what that means is they look at this community and what are the risks? What are the daily emergencies, and what are the larger ones? And I don't think pandemic and the smoke was in this one, but so it's a document that tries to forecast what the emergencies are, and then how do you staff and respond to those emergencies in your demographic. Also related to that is the strategic plan. So that is basically all 3 of those documents work together to come up with a plan for the future. Next slide. Related to that is an update I just posted on the website today, which is an update to the strategic plan. I did not really want to burden you with those documents today. They're actually fairly large, and all you have to do is ask, and I'll get you printed copies. They're also available electronically on the city website right now. What my goal tonight, though, is to give you enough information to when you open the documents, I hope it makes more sense and a little more context. Okay, so that's kind of why we're here, is those foundation documents and the history. So what has changed right now is this is our current organizational chart. So In the middle there, you can just see there's the fire chief. I have a battalion chief that it was really my operations and EMS and training chief. We have a part-time support logistics officer. We have 3 shift supervisors, which are captains. And under those captains is the goal of having 8 paid on-call firefighters assigned to those captains, not necessarily on a shift, but just responsibility-wise. So that gives us a total of 5 full-time employees. Out of that, only one of them is actually here 24 hours. The 2 chief officers, myself and the training chief, are here during regular business hours. We're also on call for callback. And then the rest of the part-time logistics person is on a temporary part-time work hours during the week. And then the support volunteer we just took on is helping us with, training and volunteer logistics support. But I guess the bottom line is that there are 2 firefighters that are part-time on call on the fire engine with 1 captain. And currently I'm staffing 24/7 with that model. And there are also 2 of them, they sleep in the apartment, which is next to the fire station, which was one of the goals in the original documents was to do that, is get them either in the station or close to the station and to provide 24/7 coverage. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we're at. I think the biggest thing to look at is the part-time employee on call numbers there. Right now we have 14 people on the books out of the 24. And why do we have 24 as a number? So these are part-time people and they're on call. There's no set schedule. We have approximately 60 12-hour shifts per month that need to be filled. And so currently we only have 12 active part-time employees that are filling those shifts. And if it's kind of self-evident there's issues with that. A part-time employee will end up getting overtime and they have other kind of other associated payroll costs with PERS and other things that might come up if we use them more than we were designed to use them. So that's why we came up with 24 is to lessen the burden on any individual and spread that out as a part-time employee over the month. But you can see that that is a staffing challenge. So that's basically the organization. Some of the things that are off to the side there are our intergovernmental agreement with Clackamas Fire for fleet maintenance. That's been in place since I've been here. They provide very good service, fleet maintenance. They do all the work on our fire engines and our vehicles. We have a pending fire marshal services agreement that you'll be looking at here shortly next month to continue our fire marshal services. So what is the public perception of the fire department? Go ahead, Haley. I kind of hate to overuse the iceberg analogy because I know we've used it over the past few months, but it actually makes sense in this regard. Above the waterline, most people experience the fire department in just a few ways. Unfortunately, one of them is if they call 911 and the fire department, EMS and police come to their house or accident or scene. And that's their interaction. And I'll have to admit, as tragic as it is, most people are pleased with the service level. The other thing is they see what's on the media, whether it's TV, news, social media, and that may be good or bad reflection of the fire service, that's the other thing they see. The remainder of it, usually with the public, is community involvement. And whether that's our, events here in town, or we go to the schools and we read to the kids, or we try to teach them fire prevention, those are the key things the public sees us for. What they don't see is usually, and I have to admit, this is like everything else. When you turn the tap water on, do you really think about where the water comes from? So it's when you call 911, most people don't think about where the service levels come from and how we manage them. But all the work is really below the water line. So the training and EMS chief, and I have this broken up. On one side is management, the chiefs on the left, and the captains and the crew on the right. And you can see the interaction there. The deeper you go, the more top heavy the work is. So really training is huge. And that is one of the top things that happens on shift. And it's one of the top things we have to manage. There's quite a bit of data and compliance that we have to manage for the crews to train. And you'll see more of that here in a bit. And as you can see, as it goes down, we have daily management. There's a lot of equipment in that fire station. I think it's safe to say there's probably thousands of pieces of equipment individually. And we have medications, we have tools and equipment and high-tech equipment, and all of it needs to be checked and maintained. So that's a big part of the day. Records management, every time they go on a medical call, they have to write a medical chart, and those have to go into a special report system. And the same with every other type of incident we go on, there's a specific report that needs to be done. Let me see if I can get my glasses on and read that. That's a little too far away. So farther down is department administration, and that's basically any business administration right there. You know, we have the budget, the management, the personnel issues. We just deal with all that. And that's mostly on top with the fire chief and the EMS chief. The captains have some level of that, but we're starting to shift to the top heavy side. As the fire chief, I'm also, as you heard, the city emergency manager. And we have all the other regional coordination, which is actually fairly significant part of our work. Whether it's the dispatch system, mutual aid, wildland fires through the state. There are multiple meetings and relationships we need to maintain to stay part of the bigger system. And then finally, unfortunately, this is probably inverted the last year, but the bottom of the iceberg is major incidents and major emergencies and disasters. Typically, that's more of a planning and training, but it's been more of a management issue than last year. So what emergency services does the Gladstone Fire Department provide? And this is a busy slide, and I apologize, but it's to prove a point that the fire service has evolved over the past decades. I began in the late 1970s, and EMS was just becoming, EMS as emergency medical services was just becoming more delivered in the home. It's almost like, house calls by the doctor were starting to return through EMTs and paramedics. So that'll be a big, and you also know that that's a big portion of our work. So with that comes a lot of compliance on training and certification. So emergency service, medical services at the basic and advanced support level, life support is our core service in the county is at advanced level. In Gladstone for the city and our department, we are a basic life support agency and support advanced life support. We do not have any minimum staffing for paramedics, but we do support it, and we do have some right now. Transportation accidents, the freeways next to us, Highway 99, we have significant transportation routes around us. And with that comes 911 calls for accidents. And actually trains and planes were in the flight path also for a major airport. Technical rescue is a term that really is basically kind of the oddball rescue. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but it's not your normal call. It may be in the water and at high rocks that we have to do a swift water rescue, or where there's an extrication, which means somebody's entrapped in some machinery or vehicles that requires additional skills and tools to get somebody out of that entrapment. So technical rescue is a big deal, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. Firefighting is not just your normal house fire. Some of this is a little redundant after the last year, but there are other types of fires: businesses, vehicles, wildland, and power poles. Pretty much everything that can catch fire has its own type of rules and tactics that we need to evaluate and train on. Hazardous material response is something that we take for granted. Natural gas, flammable liquids like gasoline, those are around us all day, and we do deal with those on a very frequent basis. And when those leak and come in contact with the normal environment, there's issues, and we have to deal with that. Hazardous conditions is kind of a general term that it's kind of the catch-all, the miscellaneous. Those are the live wires down, the broken water mains, those kind of things, localized flooding that might happen. We provide support for those. Police support is something that is really important to us, and we partner very well with the police department. We provide EMS for assaults. We work hand in hand with them to make sure that the scene is safe before our personnel go inside. Whether it's a shooting or a crime scene support or civil unrest, there's different levels of support we can give the police department. In addition to that, we also help them train their officers on delivering things like Narcan or uses of tourniquets and those type of first aid and referencing hazardous materials and those types of things. We try to support the police as much as possible. Now, the purple thing, words there that are hard to read are related. It's emergency management and disaster and major emergencies. I really don't have to talk too much about that other than there is a level of coordination on a city, county, and state level, and sometimes federal level that demands extra time and effort to coordinate those things. And then finally, miscellaneous, the fire alarms, the illegal burns, the homeless campfires, welfare checks like the police chief mentioned. And to be honest, we talked about this before the meeting started. We're kind of the catch-all social workers in addition to police. If somebody has any issue and they call 911, police or fire, one of us is going to go. And we typically go on everything that has to do with psychological welfare. So that's a long list, but it just kind of illustrates what's happened over the years. And this might seem a little out there, but I kind of want to explain why we ended up here. There's some key impacts to the fire department over the past 4 decades. And modern transportation might seem like a kind of a no-brainer, but think about it when, they make bigger cars, bigger buses, bigger trucks. That means carrying more people, more hazardous materials, and faster and more efficient. And those things have accidents. And so that has really evolved over the decades. And the very first EMT certification in class actually came out of the Department of Transportation. And that's how that evolved. So those things that have happened have evolved into our responses to those events. So that's one of the things that has happened to the fire department. Emergency medicine is also, it's very interesting that we're kind of the Mikey and the Life cereal commercial, where the reason we get thought about so much for taking on these services is because we already are deployed in fire stations throughout communities. It's pre-designated, it's pre-built, it's pre-ready, it's ready to go. So with a little bit of training and equipment, we can deliver things that we've never done before. Emergency medicine is one of those things that the trickle-down effect of technology has really pushed emergency medicine to the street. I told our physician the other day, when I was in the military, I was a medic, and we had a ventilator that we had to carry on a stretcher to put in the airplane. Today, it's about the size of a pack of cigarettes. And so those things are in the ambulances today and in our kits that can help deliver care that was never delivered in the field in past decades. So those are the kind of things, whether it's blood testing machines or airway management devices. They use endotracheal cameras now to insert tubes into the lungs. There's a lot of different things that we do because we can and because we're available to do those things. And over the years, the aptitude and qualifications of firefighters and emergency medicine or emergency medical technicians and paramedics, we're just kind of the target is where that stuff lands now. Oddly enough, war has been one of those things that has done the same thing. The pivot point was really Vietnam, when trauma was taken care of in a different way, and that was with helicopters. And so the connection of speed to take care of trauma directly related back into the street after the war, and fire engines can get to scenes quicker, and that's how air ambulances actually really took off in the United States. In a similar way, terrorism brought the same thing on. There's a couple of things that are really impactful about terrorism, but they also brought on things like tourniquets. The things that we used to, I don't know how many of you learned when you were a kid that my dad was a World War II veteran, and he's like, you need to put a tourniquet on. And then I became an EMT. Don't ever put a tourniquet on, so, but what they did is, again, medicine advanced, technology advanced, and they found out why it didn't work before, and now it works tremendously. So those are the kind of things that unfortunately were proved in war and combat that have trickled down to where we teach the public now and taught city employees those same things. Those are life-saving skills that definitely end up on the street. The other big thing about terrorism was in 1992 and in 2001, the terrorist attacks in the United States. That was a pivot point that kind of outpaced all the others. All the urban area fire departments took on terrorism response, whether they really wanted to or not. And millions of dollars were dumped into fire departments. And that kind of supports what I said about all the equipment we have. We have a lot of equipment that hopefully we never use, but it's because of terrorist response. And that was part of the Urban Area Security Initiative group here in Portland for many years. And I can tell you that we received a lot in this metro area to take on. And it's not just getting a gadget. Now it's the responsibility and the training and the certification. So again, that's one thing. And then finally, incident management might be the one that doesn't make too much sense. But in the military, perfect example now with vaccines and all kinds of emergency management, there needs to be a process, otherwise it's chaos. So back in the days in the 70s in California, the wildfires every year were starting to become a management practice that needed help. So they worked with the U.S. Forest Service and the military on instituting a program. They called it Fire Scope, and I don't remember the whole acronym, but you'll know the acronym today, which is ICS, and that's the Incident Command System. And so that's now evolved into a nationwide, worldwide adopted system, so we can all work under the same organizational chart with the same duties and responsibilities. That makes sense. So that's why wildfires, and our police chief was actually part of that team also, was we go out and we help manage the logistics of these big incidents. And it's come to a point now where fire departments across the nation are just called to manage anything. It's a mudslide, it's a pandemic. And so it's because the system works and we use it all the time. And that's why it's required training now by the federal government for most grants to get this. So long explanation of kind of a few key things that have happened over the decades, but they've all impacted the fire department and what we do. So the name fire department, as you can see now, is traditional, but it really doesn't adequately define who we are. And I think this is a really good kind of point to say that this is why we're at where we are today in Gladstone. All these things have come to head, and the past was very robust and good, but there's been things that have changed over the last 10 years that have led to tonight. Some of those past conditions are the recruitment. You know, that's probably one of the envious things that is in all the reports, is in past years, the recruitment of volunteers in the Gladstone area was off the chart. It was not uncommon to have a dozen people ready to go on an emergency because they were just at the fire station, you know, doing things together. We had dozens more on the books that could be called in if the siren went off. So recruitment was really not an issue, and it was handled in the fire station, and it was a really easier process than it is today. Staffing and response, I kind of hit on that. Now, capital equipment is one thing that is kind of an oddball here, but basically none of the equipment in that picture there is cheap. So capital expenditures in the fire department is actually a really big deal, but there's a reason some of it was done in the past different. And that has to do with the ISO rating. The Insurance Services Organization is a group that evaluates many things in your city that help determine your insurance rates. And that's a database that's used to determine fire insurance, and I believe it's used for other things too. Previously, in the past ratings, most fire departments had to do everything to get a good rating. And that, as you can tell from my previous slides, that's very difficult nowadays for any department. And that's why most departments aren't single small departments anymore in metro areas, because to do everything is very expensive. On that note, the ISO agency recognized that. And now you don't have to have your own ladder truck. You don't have to have all your own people. It's more about an area that now all those things count towards your insurance rating. And we are due for a re-rating, and that'll probably happen in my term here. But you know, we probably will get better rating out of that because we don't have to have all the equipment and all the personnel. They recognize the response area as a county. So that said, current conditions. Now, recruitment is probably the one that is affecting us the most at the moment. And why is that? So recruitment isn't as easy as just putting a sign up and saying, do you want to be a volunteer? And for one thing, now, as federal law states, when you compensate somebody for hours worked, they're not a volunteer. So we haven't really had volunteer for years. Also, and that led to my decision of taking volunteer off the fire station, because it was a little misrepresenting of the department itself. And you have conversations with people on the street and they're like, well, where's your volunteers? And there's money associated with volunteers or lack of it. And so there was a misconception on really what that meant for your fire department. And so that's one of the changes. So recruitment also is, over the years, I'll have to put it in perspective. When somebody calls 911, the firefighters go right into your house, and basically your Fourth Amendment rights are waived. And so that's a huge responsibility to put on somebody that deals with controlled medicines, that life-saving actions, personal property protection. All those things have evolved over the last few years of requiring psychological pre-testing, written testing of your skills and abilities, physical testing of your skills and abilities, criminal background checks, drug screening, medical stress testing and physicals. So this is just to even get through the door. And so that has really challenged our recruitment. And I can tell you, when we get somebody, they're rock stars. But it's getting there that has been difficult. And that kind of shrinks the border around you when you try to keep everybody in town. So prior to my starting here, they did widen the net. And so you could be outside the city limits to be part of the Gladstone Fire Department. And we've even dropped that farther now. And now that we're scheduling shifts, you can work farther away and still be able to work. So recruitment has been very challenging. But I can tell you the people we get are amazing. Staffing and response. Since the pandemic, my goal was to always have 3 people in the fire engine 24/7. That provides the best speed response for services. Pandemic kind of sped that up in my decision to do that. And that was mainly because of cross-contamination and possible infections and quarantine. So the less we did that, the better. And let me put that in context. And now I know you all know about the siren. So remember back when the siren first started being used, it goes off, it's an all call. If you're a firefighter, you come to the station and you get ready to go to the call. So that could be 5 or 15 people that come in. So, and then you'd get on the rig and go to the emergency. So 911, you call 911, goes to dispatch, they get your information, they set off the siren, you wait for everybody to come to the station, and then you go to the call. So that's how it used to work. Because of the pandemic, I moved up the staffing goals and we just put 3 people on the rig 24/7. And it has been challenging, but it has reduced or had a reduction in our response times. Capital equipment. One thing about capital equipment in the city that I find very reassuring is the establishment of a replacement fund for fire equipment. So that was really well thought out and is very good. Related to the capital equipment in the past conditions is another reason I surplus the ladder truck. It was very difficult to staff and keep people qualified. And the key thing is to have a fire engine ready to go. The fire engine is the backbone of the fire department. It goes on every emergency. And it's not, and that's a follow-up question I'll answer now, is why do you put a fire engine onto a medical call? And it's really a toolbox. It has all the life support equipment for medicine, but it also is ready to go to a fire. So it happens actually fairly frequently in Gladstone to where we'll get a 911 call and within a minute or two, we'll get another one. And so we don't have the ability to go on multiple calls, but as soon as we clear, we can go on the next one. And we have everything we need with us. So that's the reason we do that. And that's my focus, is to have that as a fire engine as the first out. I've already spoke to the ISO rating. We'll be up for a rating here probably in the next couple of years. All right, I'll try to wrap this up so you can ask anything you need to. So changes over the years, I've kind of described them, the staffing, the volunteer. I've described what the federal definition of a volunteer is not receiving any wages or compensation for the hours worked. A combination department is what we currently are. So a combination department is a mixture of either a volunteer firefighter, a part-time firefighter, and career staff. And that's where we're at today. A career fire department or like the surrounding agencies, everybody's full-time. And they also may or may not, try to do a combination department, but careers usually, especially in the metro areas, are all career. Another statistic, there are more volunteer firefighters in this nation than there are paid, but the majority of paid firefighters are in urban areas. So it's just it's a matter of coverage and service level. I'd like to describe a couple of quick terms, mutual aid versus all risk department. I'll do all risk first because we kind of touched on it. That means a fire department will take on everything. and as their own entity. That means you'll have a ladder truck. You'll be able to get to upper stories and buildings. You'll take on hazardous material teams. You'll take on water rescue, dive rescue, extrication teams, heavy rescue. There's all these, terrorism response. There's all these specialties, and all risk has become all too expensive and all too hard to manage for most agencies. You have to be really big to do that. Mutual aid is kind of one of the reasons people are getting away from all risk, is because they do a collaborative effort for all risk and use each other to help each other. Mutual aid just means that if we have a fire in Gladstone, Clackamas or Tualatin will come and help us mutually. And if they have a fire in their areas, we go to them. And we illustrated that in September last year. So, all right, so one of the last terms here is effective response force. And I know Councilor Garlington was looking at the standard of cover, and this is a term used a lot in that document. And really what it is basically what is the defined number of responders that is needed in a set amount of time to do the initial actions on that scene. And I'm paraphrasing it. It's a longer definition that is in the document. And it's provided by the National Fire Protection Association and the International City Managers Association. So what is it, and can the city of Gladstone provide it alone? Honestly, most of the calls that we go on, we can. And so that picture there shows a CPR or a medical call just outside. If it's, that reflects what a fire engine would show up with. It would be 3 personnel. In addition to that, an ambulance with 2 personnel will show up. And if it's a critical call, typically another unit will show up, and the unit means any close unit. So you could have 5 to 7 people for a critical medical call. And that's the effective response force. Now, if you want a comparison, think about when you go into the emergency room, what happens when somebody is a patient and they get rolled into the treatment room. You have a lab tech, a nurse, a physician, a respiratory therapist, an admissions person. You have about 5 to 7 people that show up just to get the initial checks done. Then you have radiology and specialty people come in. And that's kind of the same pit crew type thing that we do in the field for medical calls. That's why you need so many people. Can the city of Gladstone provide it alone? No, that's what the mutual aid is for. But for most of the time, I'd say about 70% of the time, we can do initial actions really well with the first 3 people and the ambulance. So that's effective response force. How did we deliver it in the past, and how do we do it now? So if you really kind of hit the Wayback Machine, in this area, there were different fire departments all around us. Oak Grove and the different districts all around the city, and actually in the whole metro area. And they were all risk for the most part. So when 911 went off, they went and did their own thing, and they had a lot more people. And we had a lot more people here in the past that could do that. So for the most part, you could sometimes do that. When scenes get big enough, you just need help. And that's when everybody would help each other. And that's where mutual aid came in. Mutual aid's been around forever. And it's just one of those things. But how did we deliver it in the past? Because we had the staffing and manpower and the ability to do it. What's changed? You've already seen all the answers to that question. It's the recruitment, it's the staffing, it's the ongoing management of the department. That has definitely changed over the years. Digital dispatching, alerting, and auto aid. Those are just technical terms that relate to the standard of cover document. And that's how you get dispatched. That's why we don't need the siren anymore, is because it's either a pager or an app on your smartphone that dispatches you either in the station. And we have new upgraded digital dispatching that just came in this last year that provides really clear, quick dispatching in the station directly from the 911 center. So why should you care about that? So that's actually, I'll try to relate this to air traffic control. And I couldn't show you the live map because there's a lot of protected information, but this is a screenshot. And in the very center there, you can see where Gladstone is. And every gray dot is either a fire station or a fire engine or some kind of response apparatus. Everything is tracked live in GPS. And if we were watching a live screen, you would see all those units moving around. And so that's really important when you have a life-threatening emergency, that they will dispatch the closest unit. It doesn't matter who you work for. You will go to that call And then we also have run cards, we call them, dispatch requirements. We will go on our own calls, but for life safety and automatic aid throughout the region, the closest rig will go to save a life or to put water on the fire. So that's an example of what we see daily. And that's running on my MDC, my mobile data computer in my rig or in my office every day. And you can just, if you ever want to see it, come on in and I'll show you the kind of the live air traffic control version of this. And it kind of puts in perspective what's changed over the years. You go back a couple decades, we did not know that. We did not track where everybody was. And just in the last 20 years, we've been able to actually get this more refined and better for response. So I'm going to try to wrap up by saying, why does time matter? I'm not going to read all this, but the bottom line is that the Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. government has recognized the fire service as a part of the medical system in the United States. I'll share with you at some time, there's an article by the previous Tualatin chief, Mike Dyke, and Jeff Johnson. The thing is, we're the Mikey, we ate the cereal, we'll try anything. We took on the responsibilities. We didn't really take on a funding stream for that. And so there are opportunities to get some of that money back, but we're behind the curve. So that was one of those, that's the danger of being the all risk, we'll do everything, is we take on the responsibilities and there's ongoing costs that catch up to you and we're getting caught up. So, so real quick on that previous slide, and I can have our physician talk to you at some point in detail if you have questions about the emergency medical side of this, but really time does matter. And I don't think I have to expand on that too much, but if it's a heart attack or if it's a stroke, really seconds do count. The faster we can get first treatment in there, the better survival rate there is for patients. And so that's the answer for emergency medicine. Why does time matter for fires? Over the past actually the last decade, the Underwriters Laboratory, NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology have partnered to evaluate firefighting. There's been the fire science of the past, and really the science hasn't caught up to what has happened in the past few decades. So these organizations have taken it upon themselves to do very scientific testing with heat monitors and all kinds of sensors to see exactly what happens when a fire occurs in your house or building. If you can fire up the video. What this video is, I'm sorry, this is the only fun video I have in my presentation, but this is just a demonstration. There's no narration or music, so I'll just kind of keep talking. Yeah, I will not sing, sorry. It's bad enough listening. So basically, this illustrates what you have in your house. So if you think of a fire, really it's about the accident that occurs in your house, whether it's a smoking accident, a cooking accident. Once something catches fire in your house, how fast does it burn? And in the past, and they used to call this legacy fuels versus natural or modern. But if you think about it as what was made out of natural products versus today, most things are synthetic. And I hate to use a brand name, but it's a supporting thing, IKEA. So if you think about it, and that was a brilliant business model when they came up with IKEA, but really it's about making lightweight, strong furnishings that can be shipped and put together at home. And why is that important? Because light and shippable means it's usually made out of synthetic, highly flammable materials. So if you look on the right screen, this is what the synthetic side. And once the fire actually takes off, there's a couple things you'll notice that this time is sped up, so we don't have to sit here and watch the full 4 minutes. But the smoke is greater and is more toxic and more dangerous. That really reinforces the need for smoke detectors and home escape plans. And it also reinforces the need for fast response. In a few seconds here, you're going to see what's called flashover. And that's when everything in the room reaches ignition temperature at the same time. And there it is. So everything ignites. And that's very dangerous. And you can see it was about just under 5 minutes. Previous tests were 3 to 4 minutes. And if you look at the natural side, wool and cotton, it will definitely get there, but it takes longer. my disclaimer here is this is a very scientific, clean experiment. So just take it for what it's worth. You know, probably not too many houses are like the left side and not too many are completely on the right, but there are a lot in the middle. And so the point is, let's go back to the way we used to respond. The siren goes off, we come to the station, even if you're in town, a couple minutes, maybe a minute reaction time, whether you're at work, you get to the station, you get out of your car, you get to the rig, you form a crew and you go out. That's the most delayed example I can give you from the past. Sometimes they're ready to go. That said, it still takes you another few minutes to get to the call. We've already hit that flashover point now. And that's why many fires, that's why many fires now are large when we get there. And so the need for speed is there for fire response also. So the challenges for the immediate future, recruitment, I've done everything I can to streamline that. You know, going against what the national standard is, and especially the regional standard, is difficult. But I have done what I can to streamline that process. We are getting more people. We have a few in the pipeline right now that should be starting pretty soon. The deployment model and mutual aid, those are challenges because we have to kind of understand how we fit into that and where we want to continue to fit in. And then compliance with the increasing standards. It doesn't matter if it's COVID or fire, you know, we have a lot of things we have to have the firefighters trained on. There's a minimum of 70 to almost 100 hours of training that's needed per year, depending on what qualifications they maintain. So it's pretty daunting sometimes, but I have to admit, they love it and they do it. And that's one of the recruitment standards is when we get somebody young and aggressive and talented, guess what happens? They want to do it full time and they'll get a job. And I'm a little worried about the near future here because the pandemic has cut back on hiring in academies in the region. People are going to start hiring again. I love having good firefighters and I love having a good reputation if they go somewhere else and talk well of us, but we also have to replace them. So anyways, next. In summary, I just wanted to say the dedication and community support of the Gladstone Fire Department remains strong. We currently maintain response capabilities with highly trained, qualified firefighter EMTs, and we rely extensively on our partner agencies to provide the community with the current standard levels of response, those effective response forces. The past decade and current events reveal that it's time to address the challenges in the recruitment, staffing, training, and emergency service levels within the city. And so really just want to close with the top three considerations for the future. One is to maintain what we're doing now, is to maintain staffing 24/7, 365 out of the station. In support of that, we can shave off valuable time if we move the crew inside the station and convert the offices into crew quarters. So that's my number one immediate recommendation or consideration. Entering into the IGA for fire marshal services would be really important so we can evaluate our staffing and organization while they provide those services for us, and complete a fire department master plan. I think that's the missing document to the other library of documents that we have, is let's talk about the staffing and service levels and what is the commitment? Where do you want to go? What is our facility planning to match that staffing level and deployment? And then really what are their long-term funding solutions to get it? And so I think these are the top three things that need to be discussed in more detail to address your goal for the future. With all that babbling, I'm going to take a drink of water and entertain any questions.
You have to tell them what that slide is.
That was my first fire in Gladstone. It was a bread truck. Yes, it was toast. And no, this is a one right afterwards. This is right on 82nd, right next to the off ramp. But the tradition is, you know, the first fire, and Randy knows this. I bought food for the station, and but it was a really good example of seeing the talent that we have here, and the coordination between police and the agencies that came on this call. So with that short story, any questions?
Councilor Alexander.
Great presentation, by the way, very informative. I just had two things through there I wanted to know about. You said when you enter a home, you give up the Fourth Amendment right. Has that ever been an issue anywhere? I mean, there's nothing, you call 911, I'm not saying I don't care if you come in. I mean,
No, I think it's more of Thank you. I think it's more of an acknowledgement of the seriousness of the responsibility. Yes, nationwide, there have been claims. There's always these things that happen when, did somebody steal something? And, there's, whether they're true claims or not, it comes down to the question of how did you hire and what are the qualifications and background of this person? So it's really about matching that kind of responsibility with the right vetting process to hire them, instead of trying to defend.
And then I have one
Later.
more. Just, again, it leads all back to cost. Since we have the mutual aid package, does that get us a better ISO rating, and does that save the city money?
This is a very good question that might take a long time, but I'll give you the short points of maybe further discussion. Currently, mutual aid is not mutual with Clackamas. They come into our city more than we go into theirs. We're not a slow fire department. We run more calls than many of the neighboring fire stations, but it's because of our location and our density. And again, the service level of people just calling. There's many reasons for that. What was the rest of your questions?
Well, if we get a better ISO rating, do we get cheaper insurance in our city?
Well, I'm not sure that the total point spread will give us lower, it will definitely improve our rating. I'm not sure how that'll reflect
Yeah.
into the bill.
We had industrial areas, it would help them out. It doesn't help
Yeah.
the homeowners.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Every insurance company has their own scheme for each
Yeah.
town and area. They don't, the ISO is more commercial thing.
Oh, okay, well, there you go then. So
And
save us any
the
money.
savings to them it's not much.
I mean, I just thought a city as a whole, we get a better rating, we get a better price. That doesn't work that way.
It also recognizes the type of department you have, and it's not just the fire department, it's dispatch, it's your water system. There's many things that go into that rating,
Oh, okay.
but it's actually a reflection of how well your service is. So it's kind of a self-evaluation in some regard, in a lot more detail than we'd probably spend doing. So there is a value to it on that level too. It would help the decision makers look at the future.
Thank you.
Well, I know my insurance is $300 cheaper because we're not a volunteer fire department, so it does make a difference. Yeah, so it makes a difference.
$300.
How much you're saving, like 500? Yeah,
How could you be saving that when they haven't redone the ISO rating for 8 years?
because they just check if you're a
Because they don't
volunteer
use-
or
they
you're
don't use
manned.
ISO.
They asked if
each
we were a
company has their
volunteer
own thing.
versus if we were professional fire department. That made the difference. Yeah.
I don't buy all that. Anyway.
I just redid my homeowner's insurance and they asked the same question.
Yeah.
mm,
I don't know. They know anything.
But that's what they ask.
No, I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Made a difference.
I have a bunch of questions, a bunch of comments, but I think it's really all completely pointless. I appreciate everything you said, and it's absolutely correct. And that was being done by volunteers who would have done it for free, who never had the option for any of this, even hiring a paid chief, which I kind of agree with. I would agree with 100% if there was a residency requirement, because you act different in your own home. You wipe your feet better on the door. It's just different. But your views are from being a paid firefighter, just like those reports are written by retired paid chiefs. They are all biased opinions. The second report that Tom did, they had to ask like 50 people in the community. Mike handpicked the people to interview for that report. And most of the stuff in that report is what Tom wanted. So those reports can be whatever we want. But we were doing all this with volunteers from the community, and things have tapered off. But has anybody asked the question why and what's going on to make them taper off? When you have people who are employed and were supposed to be doing recruitment for volunteers and never did their job, they've been told repeatedly, we got to get something going on. We got to get to the schools, go to the colleges. And all we did is hung a sign up, because there was a lot of steps in this process, because all this has been planned. There was a lot of people working on it, but there was a lot of areas that have been allowed to fail, but nobody came to the fire department and said anything until we were told we were hiring a chief. And then that chief came in who has absolutely zero respect for volunteers and made that crystal clear. And then you wonder why everybody's leaving. There's so many things fundamentally wrong with the combination department. They don't work. You always have high training rates, but or high turnover rates, but there's so many other things that are missing from the picture of the community. Everything you said the fire department does is what classes that we've put on and we've trained. We've had 30 to 40, 45 people at one time throughout the community. There's always a moving thing that we're trained in all of this stuff. And now how many people do we have? We have none. You say seconds count. If you roll a rig out there right now, somebody calls 911 a minute later, what's that response going to be? Because we used to, when we had a call, we would have, sometimes night calls, you'd have 3 or 4 people show up, but you'd have 10, 15 people show up. When these bad weather things that you paid chiefs say, oh my God, nobody's going to show up. We never worried about that before, because if it was inclement weather, we had so many people coming in. It was crazy because that's when people knew the calls were going to happen. And you build this new system, or Tom, I'm going to blame most on Tom. I'm not blaming it on you. Of taking opportunities away from volunteers with these paid positions. And then you say, why won't the volunteers come back? The first day this paid captain thing started, one of the captains ran a call. They came back, wanted to start their medical chart, and we dropped another call. And said, I'll take it. I've been a captain here for 15 years. You can go with us, but you can't take the crew out. But you can come along with us because there's a paid captain available. He's the one taking the crew out. So if I'm not allowed to take an engine out and you have people staffing, why am I going to get off my couch if there's a call? That's stupid to go. If you know you're not going to get anything prior, all your people would be, I don't know if anybody's around. We better show up. But you guys talk about these times, which all these times were, especially the ones Thomas was talking about, were a bunch of crap. From my house to the fire station, I'd have the engine out the door, and probably my average is probably 1:30 seconds. The fastest I had an engine out the door was 47 seconds. But if you drop a second call, that's shot. We're waiting for Oak Grove or Oregon City to come because you have no volunteers left. Because of the changes we've made, it's pushed everybody out. These changes, the changes that Tom made, he's never paid a penny of taxes in Gladstone. Don't give a crap what his opinion are. He's a paid chief somewhere else. He came in, and if you use the word volunteer around Jeff or Tom, they corrected you instantly because it's embarrassing.
Counselor, I'd
People
like
in this
to-
community, you want volunteers, you want people to come in. Nobody knows it's a volunteer station, but prior, nobody knew it was a volunteer organization either. They all thought we were paid, but we've taken all these opportunities away from everybody. And then you say, why is nobody showing up? I grew up in a town with volunteers. I raised my kid in a town with volunteers. My grandson's screwed. If there's a call right before something happens to him, shit's gonna go down because this city can no longer provide coverage for my family. When Tom was here and people started leaving, I don't know why the city didn't jump in and say, what the hell's going on? Why is half the department walked out? But nobody cared. But how are we going to get those people back? So we know that if we make a call, we're not the second call and we're not screwed. Because during that process with Tom, there was 1.5 responding officers, me and Newton worked evenings. So if there was a fire at my house or if I got in a wreck, I was screwed because this whole volunteer is such an evil thing. These people aren't trained. Don't shake your head at me.
No, I'm
Do
sorry.
not shake your head at me.
Wait,
I've
just
spent a lot of time in
Wait,
this,
wait a minute.
and everything I've said, you guys don't
Okay.
listen to because it's your personal opinion.
No,
That's
no,
not what we're here for, is a tax.
So,
Understood. Can I
May-
respond?
no, so Chief, please, can I have a moment, Mayor? Can I
Yes.
ask for, request something here? This is such an esoteric, down in the weeds conversation. It needs to happen someplace else. My understanding tonight was that we were going to be briefed.
Yep.
Counselor Ripley, I understand your passion here, and quite frankly, you and I have had some conversations about data. I get it, but I think that this is a conversation that is so esoteric and so out of what we're doing right now. Honestly, I
Okay,
mean, I
I'm done
support
then.
you on it, Counselor, but I just think that we're way down in
You
the
know,
weeds.
2 years, this is the first time we've talked about it. Nobody gives a shit. You don't understand what this community had prior.
Counselor,
Yeah, you need
And
to
this is
censor your-
community
I'm
that I don't
concerned
wanna
about
live
it too,
in.
because I believe that truthfully, your passion in the volunteerism and the dedication you gave to the fire department, it's palpable. We understand that. I don't think anybody's tried to avoid this issue. I think that we just were presented on a number of different issues that this community's had to deal with over the last year. I think the chief wants to get a path to ground here. I understand where you're coming from, Counselor. I think this particular time for this conversation, it just became so esoteric and down in the weeds. It's so technical. I'm not even sure I can follow it, and I can follow a lot of technical things. So I'm just asking you, could you give us a chance? In fact, I'd love to work with you on it if you got those concerns. I'll be with you right there with you. I just think tonight's not the night.
When
That's
was
all
the
I'm
time?
asking.
This has been a 2-year issue. When I got pushed out of that place because I don't like change. Look at this change we have. This is not something to like. So I'm gonna drop
Okay.
it.
Oh, no,
Thank you.
Counselor, I
Yeah,
understand that. I'm just asking you to decouple for tonight.
My
Yeah.
biggest issue, if it had to go away, whatever, but my biggest issues was the lies and manipulation that it took to get there.
I understand, but
And
he's
there's
not
a lot
our
of people-
chief
there's
anymore.
people
We
in
have
this room that were involved in it also.
we have this director now who's trying to work with this. And I think what I'm hearing from you, Counselor, is that there are certain topics that haven't been addressed. And I hear that. I just feel like we're so down in the weeds on this conversation. I'm just feeling
Well,
like
it's not really down in the weeds. It's what do we want our community? Do we want this place to feel like home? You know, I grew up in a community that had a 911 dispatch center, a police department, a volunteer fire department, a library,
I understand
a
that.
fire marshal. We've lost our dispatch center. We no longer have a library. We no longer have a fire marshal. What are we going to get rid of next? Gladstone is slipping away, and most of it's because of manipulation and lies and greed.
I can't agree with that, but I think what I've also learned tonight from both the city administrator, police chief, and the fire chief is that the expansion on these service models, some of them are based on technology, some of them are based on historical precedents. Chief was talking about domestic terrorism, war, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we have a model that's shifting, and I think possibly the disconnect here may be where the volunteerism model is not working in this particular instance. But I'm not saying it can't work.
Yeah, let's
Counselor
stop this
Ripley.
conversation. Because
Right.
You're actually talking stuff that doesn't make sense.
Well,
You say
All right.
it doesn't work this direction, but I mean, we can see it's a complete failure right now.
understood. If you feel like the fire department's a complete failure, I'd have to probably question that because I think the fire department's done pretty well over the last couple of years.
And their
So-
numbers are dropping and dropping and
So
dropping.
does anybody have any
I
questions
just,
for Chief?
I got lost on that part.
Counselor Garlington?
Counselor Garlington, your mic is off.
Thank you. So I won't ask that question. Sorry about that. Capital equipment. You guys just got a new fire truck and they used quite a bit of that capital equipment. Are we working on a plan to bump that or not bump it back up, but make sure that it's funded 10 years from now when we need another new truck? That's in the works?
Yes, Counselor, that was in place before I started. That's one of the well-done planning efforts is that there's an equipment replacement fund already in place.
And that gets
It's
funded every
yes,
month?
That's correct.
Like, okay. And then when you talked about the all risk, is that Clackamas fire? Are they kind of, because you said we don't really have the all risk. So does that mean we have parts of the all risk and they have parts, or Clackamas is our all risk? And
I think your first statement was more correct.
Okay.
Every department is trained to go on all things.
okay.
They just don't have the resources to deal with them with an effective response force or specialized equipment. So to answer your question, I'm not sure exactly all the capabilities of Clackamas Fire. I can tell you that we train for everything. But we can't respond to everything with everything that's needed. So that's a shared responsibility throughout the region.
So when you're on a call and something else comes in that's fairly tangible,
Mhm.
significant, they're your backup call to come into Gladstone
Right.
or anybody that's closest to that particular address.
That is correct.
Okay. And then I agree with master plans. I've seen them. I've read them in different departments. I think that one of the things that a master plan gives people is something to read, something to look at, and gives an overall view that maybe in different perspectives, other people couldn't didn't think of. So if you can figure out a way to get that funded, I think that that's something that, down the line in the next year or two should be considered for your department.
And I think we are putting that in the proposed biennium budget that you're going to be considering.
That's all. I'm done.
Counselor Todd.
Yeah, I was just wondering, your number one on your sort of goals right now is getting the firefighters into the quarters, the crews quarters. That's taking longer than we had anticipated, right? I mean, moving everything back and forth. What's the timeline now?
If we're going to move forward, I can get a more accurate timeline, but I think we could finish it before the end of the biennium.
And what's the holdup with
There was
that?
just some unanticipated code requirements that I think every remodel encounters.
And it was from
So-
you moving into Daryl's place, right? The McKay's place, and then moving the guys.
Correct.
into-
Expanding our office space and
Mhm.
classroom space was in anticipation of getting the crew quarters inside.
Okay. Okay.
That's it. Don't see a hand. I had a couple questions. The organizational and management evaluation and the survey update and service delivery and those documents, who authored those?
Um,
I know I was interviewed by them, but I don't recall what the name of the firm was.
I believe ESCI,
ESCI,
Emergency Service.
Emergency Services.
Okay, and they authored the other documents as well?
They
your
authored
standards?
authored
all
all
of
of them
them?
except the recent update I just uploaded.
Okay. And then the ISO rating, we already talked about that. I know you can't give me an average because the calls change so dramatically year by year. What is the average number of calls that you guys go on a year?
Currently, it's actually maintained, I think, for many years around the 1,500 per
1,500.
year. The last couple of years, they've gone up to 16. But last year, we were hitting close to 17. And Councilor Ripley and I have a lot of conversations about this. It's about data mining and trying to figure out those true numbers. And there's an ongoing process of me trying to get more data out of dispatch centers so we can get true numbers.
Okay.
Because I think it's just an average. There's more to it than that.
Okay. And then with the training facility being dismantled at Meldrum Bar, are we deficient in training because we don't have that available to us? Or do we have someplace else that we can do that training?
We've been very good about working with the school district and other places that have large spaces that we can pull hose and scoop water and do some of the big things that need open space. And the pandemic actually has slowed things down with close crew training. We also have plans to have options within our facility at the Public Works Building to do indoor training there and cooperative agreements with the schools and other places in town.
Do we need to start looking for an area to do more of a facility like we had?
I
Or
think we can address that in the master planning when we get
okay,
there.
so it's not something that needs
Yeah.
to be addressed soon. Any other questions?
Well, just so that dismantling, are we storing that stuff? I mean, I talked to you earlier, I know, but are we storing it? Are we gonna use it again? Are we selling it? Are we donating it? Are we getting something for that equipment?
So the goal there is to keep what is most valuable to us, and what we have to surplus, we try to surplus to an agency that we can get some training
Barter.
with, so if we work with Clackamas and they take anything out of there, we're keeping our main fire training equipment, the flame simulator, the vehicle simulator and stuff like that. Those are requirements we have to do, so we're going to keep that equipment. But places to use what we're missing, we're trying to work those agreements out for donations. And if
Okay.
that doesn't work out, we will surplus for money.
You look like you wanted to say something.
I was going to kind of sum up and end on a good note. Gladstone has a very special fire department. We understand your passion, Randy. We do.
We used to have a special fire department.
I
Anyway.
think it is unique for a city our size to continue to have a fire department, and the people that work there are so incredibly responsive. It does cost more to have your own fire department, and we have a stellar police department as well. And I think what the chief is trying to explain to you is that with all of the changes that are happening, whether it's through the technology or the recruitment requirements, it is getting more difficult to retain paid on-call. So combination staffing fire departments do have challenges with that. But if Gladstone wants to continue to have its own fire department, we've got to get creative on how the revenue sources are going to be sustainable in the longer run for that. And so tonight was really about showing you how we operate as a fire department, and we do need to continue to have those conversations for the next couple of years. So I think he did an outstanding job in this presentation so that we all understand how we're providing services. And we appreciate your guys' interest in this as we continue to move forward.
And all those documents, like you stated, are on the website.
Correct.
And if you need copies of them, let staff know, and they'll get them for you. Thank you very, very much.
And
for
one
the
thing, Rick,
presentation.
I have no disrespect for you. You're shaking your head. That set me off because you were disagreeing with something that I knew was
Oh,
factual.
yeah.
But I know you're not the cause of this stuff. But you're not being the solution either right now. We still have a lacking of emergency service in our town.
Okay.
But with you being on the paid side, there's just a difference there. You have to admit that because it's been seen there for the 28 years as I was there running calls. But it's not you. I don't have any issues with you. I have issues with the deception and the lies and the bullshit that's going on.
Okay.
If people can't be honest about stuff and they can't give factual information, we don't get anywhere.
Okay, well, we need to wrap this meeting up. So I just wanted to remind people that we have some upcoming meetings. March 29th at 6:30 is the Budget Committee orientation, and April 13th at 6:30 is the next regular City Council meeting. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn, please? Do I have a second? Motion was made by Counselor Tracy and seconded in tandem by Counselors Garlington and Todd to adjourn. Any discussion? Could you do a roll call vote, please, Haley?
Counselor Ripley,
Yes.
Counselor Alexander,
Yes.
Alexander, Counselor Tracy, Counselor Hartman,
Aye.
Counselor Todd, Counselor Garlington,
Yes.
Mayor Stimple.
Yes, meeting's adjourned at 8:40 PM. Thank you all very, very much.